Hello, and you are welcome to PrimeStar TV. In PrimeStar TV, we engage Nigerians' most impactful voices in conversation that matters. My name is Adeshina Oluwagbemiro, and today we are honored to be joined by a highly respected public servant, a legal practitioner, and former Minister of Communication. Of course, he was also former Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice in OyoState. He has served twice as a commissioner in OyoState. He was also a legislator in OyoState. I am talking in respect of Barrister Adebayo Shittu. From the courtroom to the corridor of power, Barrister Shittu has been a prominent figure in Nigeria's political landscape for decades. We will talk about his journey, the state of Nigeria's ICT sector, youth development, and his thought on the future of Nigeria. Barrister Shittu, thank you for joining us.
It's my very big pleasure.
Yes, it's a pleasure having you on PrimeStar TV.
Thank you.
It's been a while.
Well, we thank God for life, and we thank God for Nigeria. Despite everything, Nigeria remains work in progress.
Work in progress. Why did you say Nigeria remains work in progress?
Well, because we keep having challenges at every twist and turn. But Nigerians of goodwill do not lose hope that things would continue to improve. So for me, Nigeria is work in progress. We continue to keep our hands on the saddle, and we believe that things will continue to improve.
All right, let's go straight into the business of the day. Well, of course, I know you very well, so you don't need to introduce yourself. But for the benefit of the viewers, I would like you to briefly share your journey, from being a lawyer to a politician and public servant.
Well, I thank Almighty God. He is the owner of all gratitude. He deserves all our gratitude, and we continue to thank him. I qualified as a lawyer in 1979, having graduated from the Nigerian Law School. Before I graduated, I had contested election into the then OyoState House of Assembly. Of course, it was the bigger OyoState, comprising of the current OyoState and Osun State.
Okay.
So we got into the House on the 2nd of October, 1979. On the 8th of October, the then governor of OyoState, Bola Ige, sent a letter to the Speaker of the House of Assembly, one-page letter, saying, "Dear Mr. Speaker, please get the House of Assembly to approve the following names as members of the OyoState cabinet." And the Speaker read the letter to us, and my sense of knowledge of constitutionalism told me this should not be the procedure, because if you are asking us to approve a list, we should have information about everyone on the lists, particularly the CV of each of them. So I raised my hands. That was my first legislative activity. I raised my hands and said, look, this is the wrong procedure. The letter should be sent back to Bola Ige to send to us a CV of each of those on the list. Of course, in the tradition of party politics, it was felt very strange that a member of the same party,
that's UPN
at that time, would criticize a leader who has sent a list for approval. I believe all the grammar that I could about separation of powers, about the independence of the legislature, about doing things rightly and correctly and so on.
The book concepts.
Of the book concept. Unfortunately, the speaker, when he recovered from the shock, he said, as speaker, I overrule. Those in favor say aye, aye. Those not in favor, no. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. And that was it. And, my problem in the then House of Assembly started from that day. At the end of the day, sometime in 1982, after about 3 years, I brought in another motion for the setting up of an investigative, committee to probe a contract that had just been awarded, for OyoState Road. Because I felt that it was not properly packaged. I wanted the House to, investigate the circumstances of the contract. And I succeeded in convincing the House of Assembly. But by the second day, the new motion was tabled saying that setting up of people should be overruled and all of that. And it became a very big problem for me and for the government at that time. And that led to my dismissal from the party, the Unity Party of Nigeria, which was, supposed to be a progressive party. And so they did everything, got me, harassed and all of that. And at the end of the day, I was dismissed. That forced me and some other people who had similarly been, sent out of the party. People like late SM Afolabi, who was deputy governor at that time.
The former Minister of Interior.
Adebayo, and a few others were similarly dismissed. And that, forced us into NPN at that time, which led to the ouster of UPN from the governance of OyoState at that time. Anyway, thereafter, I became Commissioner for Home Affairs, Information and Culture. That was 1983, and I'm happy that
that's under Oluloyo.
That was under Oluloyo. Unfortunately, that government was short-lived because the military, struck and, ended democratic governance. Well, I, went back to
3 months, if I'm not mistaken.
3 months.
Okay.
I went back to my legal practice. That was when I started my legal practice. And then when, by the time Ladoja came into office, I supported him. Initially, I was appointed as a member of the Judicial Service Commission. And then he got impeached illegally, albeit. And at the end of the day, the Supreme Court, ruled that, he could not have been properly impeached and all of that. And consequently or subsequently, I got appointed as the Honorable Commissioner for Home Affairs, Information and Culture School. That was my first time as commissioner. That was 1983. Again in 2011, I contested election as CPC candidate for governorship
in OyoState.
In OyoState, I lost the election. I contested again in 2015. Again, I lost, and I became, the Federal Minister of Communications. It was an active, period, and that was the period that I got transformed into a national political actor. Because, that meant that I was no more just a local political actor, a national. In all of these appointments, I have faced a lot of challenges because my perception is that politics is the most important profession that anybody can participate in, because it is only through politics that you can really impact and transform the lives of, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of, people. But my experience is that at every stage, people do not want the truth told. At every stage, people prefer compromises than facing reality in governance. At every phase, you discover that the wrong choices are what political leaders get engaged in. The ideas that the late Chief Obafemi Awolowo taught us, and I pride myself as one of the very few students of the Awolowo School of Politics. The idea thing is, look, there must be life more abundant for the masses. If you are in government and you cannot engage in impactful, programs of governance, then you are not fit to be there. He believed in life more abundant, and I too believe very strongly that governance must be about ensuring life more abundant for people, and that is why I believe that anybody who calls himself a progressive must also, like the late Chief Awolowo, believe in free education at all levels, believe in free health services for the masses. Those two should be the basic, benefit that the masses should enjoy and benefit, from the masses. Unfortunately, in today's Nigeria, nobody is talking of those two basic things. I am still interested in contesting for the governorship, and I can assure you.
Before we get to that, are you when you were elected as a legislator, at the state level, was there any training that was organized for you legislator at that time to tell you, the rules of the game?
Unfortunately, there is never any such training. Everybody relies on whatever knowledge, intuition, and so on.
Okay.
For me, politics, like the late Chief Awolowo, has been a matter of intuition. Things you think are the basic, which the masses should expect from elected officials.
Now another question is, are you saying that, because I expect that being a legislator, that is where, educated people that, are intellectually sound should be. And you've just made me to know that, being critical, could be, could get a legislator into a problem.
Unfortunately, and this is very unfortunately, there has never been any ideological training for us then, as is the situation even now. Everybody gets elected in the House of Assembly. When you get elected, you are on your own. You are supposed to, react only to what the executive, gives you. There has not been that, and it is rather unfortunate that, we do not have training for political parties. Like, for instance, I'm a member of the APC, and I've had interviews on national television where interviewers would ask me, what is the position of your party on so subject matter? And because I have never been invited or never participated in the formulation of the standard of the party for each of these subject matters, I say, unfortunately, I don't know of any position. It's only what leaders pronounce, in the course of their governance, that you adopt as perhaps the position of the party. And that is not the right thing for us to do. I think political parties should have training schools, where when people come into government, the leadership or the executive of the party should organize proper simulation exercises for people to know and agree to what should be the position of the party on education, on health, on rural development, on agriculture, on transportation, on several other things.
So are you saying that legislature is just a tool of the executive? And I want you to also respond together with the fact that I want you to share your view on the practicality of the separation of power in the Nigerian political landscape.
Well, it's a very difficult question to answer. The truth, as I have earlier said, is that there are no training grounds. A lot of people come into the various legislatures, they don't have anything upstairs, by way of, a procedure to adopt on subject matters of governance. So when situations are there, and again you want to ask, people who go into the legislature, a lot of them, do they really have, an ideological orientation? do they really, what's the aim of going to the thing? People just go as a matter of advancing their personal interests. It's not about, being committed to specific ideas on issues of governance. Unfortunately, that is the situation. And so, in the absence of any ideological orientation and in the absence of any specified and documented, position on issues of governance, everybody, is, on his own. And when issues arise more often than not, whoever is the executive would have, great influence. Particularly again because for people to even get elected to the House, they need the patronage of the party leadership. At the state level, you need the governor to approve for you to be nominated. At the national level, party leaders in the various zones, regions, or states, you do have an influence. So if you relied on a party leader to get elected into the House, it becomes very difficult for you not to kowtow to the wishes and demands of the party leadership.
So it is correct to say that the legislature that we have in Nigeria is just a mere rubber stamp institution.
Well, unfortunately, because of the quality of members of many of these legislatures, who perhaps hardly have the proper orientation, they unwittingly become, weapons for the use of the
executive. All right. Before we leave that, as a legal practitioner, can you assess judiciary, in government?
Well, I am a lawyer, like it will be very difficult for me to comment on the, position or rating of Nigeria's judiciary, except to hope that they will continue to be patriotic and ensure that their performance of their judicial duties, fall in line with the best national interests of our country.
So it has to do with conscience of the individual.
Has to do, because nobody can force any judicial officer to misbehave. But it is easy for a judicial officer to submit himself to dictation, perhaps because of finance, perhaps because of, tribal, political, or other emotions and all of that. So it's up to the individual judicial officer.
This is where we'll draw a curtain for this interview. And this is going to be an episode 1. We're going to have an episode 2. And so please watch out for the episode 2.